So let's talk about the State of Judea, what that means, and how that is distinct from the State of Israel.
Yeah, the state of Judea is the kind of political structure that began to emerge in the Jewish settlements, colonies in the West Bank after the June 67 war. And at first, this was,
Let me just interrupt for people.
yeah,
That is when Israel occupied Gaza and the West Bank,
and the
including
West Bank,
Northeast
absolutely.
Jerusalem. Yeah,
Yeah, what we call the 6 Days War, and
right.
Israel occupied the the West Bank and the Gaza Strip alongside the Golan Heights and the Sinai Peninsula. And within the West Bank, which a group of right-wing Israeli ideologues and political groups regarded as the ancient land of Israel, a certain ideological infrastructure was developed. At first, it was very marginal. It had very little impact on Israeli politics. But once the Likud under Menachem Begin in 1977 ended the labor Zionist domination or dominance in Israeli and Zionist politics, these ideologues became far more influential and began to develop through learning centers, through the writings of their rabbis, their gurus, a kind of a literature that was very ideological in its nature and interpreted the reality of the 1970s and the 1980s and later of the 21st century as a monumental historical moment in the life of the Jewish people, where the old ancient biblical Israel is going to return, and the days of the golden period, or the glorious period of the past, would be reenacted. And for that matter, the ideologue said two things have to happen. One, you need to have sovereignty all over ancient Israel, that is, all over historical Palestine, Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, and you need to maintain a theocratic regime. And therefore, the problem was not just the presence of so many Palestinians in that coveted new kingdom, but also the presence of secular Jews who have served a certain purpose in history in their eyes, but have already exhausted their historical role, and therefore they were also an impediment for the recreation of the glorious biblical kingdom that they read about in the Old Testament. Now, from a marginal group in the 70s and the 80s, they became a powerful political force because they succeeded in paving the way into the more impoverished parts of the Israeli Jewish society, especially among the second and third generation of North African Jews who lived in the slums of the big cities, in the infamous development towns of Israel, which lacked proper economic, educational, and professional infrastructures. And they were quite easily recruited to this ideology, and their way of living anyway was already quite traditional and far more religious than that of the secular Jews. So they became a power, a formidable power, and we already saw it in the elections during the time of the corona pandemic. But their moment of peak came in November 2022, when Netanyahu, with all his problems, decided to align himself with that coalition of the State of Judea and was willing to give them anything they wanted in order to remain in power. And that meant giving them the ministry of Homeland, what would be in America the Homeland Security, a powerful position within the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Finance. But even more important, I think, allowing them to occupy senior and important position in the police, in the army, and in the Secret Service. So now they have a very strong grip over the Israeli state altogether, and by that I meant that the state that they are looking at which I call the State of Judea, is swallowing gradually the State of Israel.
There was always, these are the Misrahi, they're called in Israel, and they always there was always tension with the Ashkenazi, the European-born Jews who dominated Israel, let's say up until the 80s, although of course Netanyahu's family comes out of Poland. And what you saw was a kind of, there was Avi Shlam writes about it quite well in his memoirs. What is it, Three Worlds, I think it's called. But there was always that tension, that inherent kind of racism. I mean, you mentioned this in your book, and it's fascinating that those groups, many of whom they were Arab Jews, or as you said, they came from Morocco or Ethiopia, or wherever, they were poorly treated by the Ashkenazi.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that they become the new power base because, of course, they were I don't want to call them second-class citizens, but they certainly, among many Ashkenazi leaders, were a kind of embarrassment.
Absolutely. This is a tragic history, and you're right. My friend Avi writes about it very well in his book, Three Worlds. They were brought, I mean, not they, their grandparents, so to speak, were brought to Israel in the early 1950s because the Zionist movement, or the new state of Israel, failed to convince millions of Jews who lived in the United States and in the United Kingdom and parts of Europe to immigrate to Israel. And quite reluctantly, the Zionist leadership decided to bring people that they regarded as Arab Jews. Namely, they were not only Jews, they were also Arabs. But with the help of their own academic advisors, they embarked on what one of them called a process of de-Arabizing the Arab Jews, namely making them European Jews. And one of the best way for an Arab Jew to be accepted as an equal to a European Jew is to display hatred and racism towards the Arab, and in fact towards his or her own identity. And that creates quite a very troubled mental infrastructure, as well as a difficult social and economic condition that they found themselves in because they were pushed into the geographical and social margins of the society. Now, something else happened because the governments did not deal with social welfare and economic problems. The religious groups entered instead of the government and had a lot of influence of the younger generation. So it's not only Mizrahi versus Ashkenazi, it's also a whole generation of young Israelis that went through what one can call national religious, rather than a secular democratic, through national religious educational system that produces graduates who are racist, theocratic in their way of looking at democracy, human rights, and civil rights, and quite committed to the Zionist dream. Some of those youngsters we have seen in the selfies that they themselves filmed during the genocide of Gaza, and it's very easy to recognize the language that they use, the hatred, the racism, and unfortunately this is not a marginal phenomenon. This is a very widespread phenomenon and is part of the power base of what I call the State of Judea.
Like the Christian right in the United States, they view politics through the lens of the Bible, and talk about what that means, especially this campaign to raise the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I think Ben Gvir is one of the leaders of this, and rebuild the Second Temple. It's all, of course, mythology. I don't know. Do we really know exactly where Judea and Samaria were? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like the Christian right, it is suddenly the politics is filtered through this biblical mythology.
Absolutely, and it has like in the case of the Christian Zionists, it has a pseudo scientific side to it. Near the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, that is near Haram al Sharif, where the Al Aqsa Mosque exists, there is something called the Institute for Building the Third Temple, supposedly an academic institute that researches the history of the temples in ancient times and builds models for the third temple in the future. This is a part of,
Let me just stop you for a
yeah,
moment. This was the Romans raised the Jewish temple. Was it 70 A.D.? Is that
70
date correct?
AD. Yeah, yeah,
And then, of course, uh, expelled Jews from Jerusalem. This was after the Bar Kokhba revolt? And then it's always been among the religious Zionists. And then now we have the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I think that's where the Prophet Muhammad supposedly ascended to heaven. It's one of the major holy sites in
absolutely.
Islam that people rated as the third most important, but extremely important. And the idea is really to tear it down, which would, of course, ignite much of the Muslim world.
Yes. So one feature of this messianic vision is indeed to replace the mosque, the two mosques on the mount with the third temple. But there is another aspect to this missionary, this vision, which is to create or recreate the kingdom of David and Solomon. Not that there is a clear map in the Bible, there are no maps, but they have a certain cartography in mind, which stretches far beyond historical Palestine, that is Israel and the occupied territories, into Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Now, right now, that looks totally insane and not a very practical or even possible or probable scenario. But what I would say that although I don't think they will ever be able to achieve that geographical kind of extension or expansion rather, I'm not sure they would not attempt it. That by itself is a kind of irrational strategic and future behavior that I think will also contribute to the disintegration of Israel in the more distant future.
Can we argue that that's what they're doing now? They are essentially expanding Greater Israel into Gaza. They've already expanded, let's call it Greater Israel, into southern Lebanon. They've moved almost up to Damascus in Syria. Is that what is driving this expansion? Then, of course, these strikes being carried out in Iran, in Qatar.
Absolutely, this is the model that they are building. The model is if of the center of gravity, the power base of the Middle East is in a Jewish Zionist Jerusalem, and the whole region is run from there with vassals, with allies, and with enemies that are constantly being punished. And in the meantime, the space of the state extends over the borders of what used to be mandatory or historical Palestine. Absolutely right. There's already military presence in South Lebanon, in the south of Syria, and I don't think they're going to stop there. And what I think very difficult for your viewers, Chris, to realize it, that there is a difference between their internal discourse in Hebrew and what sips out or make itself out in English or is being translated into English. Because if you visit their centers of learning, if you read their own websites, if you kind of make a more profound effort to look at what they write and take it seriously and talk about, then you can see that the ambition is far more is more than just having the military presence in South Lebanon or South Syria. That the ambition is to really rebuild that ancient biblical Israel, and regarding many of the areas west of the River Jordan, such as Jordan, as part of that biblical kingdom that by right or by God's will belongs actually to the Hebrew people, namely the current Jewish people.